It starts with a date, the 24th day of the 9th month, and it's still Haggai speaking as the prophet. And in verse 11 it says, "This is what the Lord Almighty says: ask the priests what the law says." It's amazing how often this theme comes up in Scripture, that we look to the moral law. And God is telling his prophet to tell the people to ask the question of the priest who has a handle on the law, what the law has to say. And when we see these things, we mustn't just kind of like, oh, no, but we're in the New Testament here. And so we'll just forget about the law. We'll just move on from that. It's all about grace. And you see, when you start to think like that, we are saved by grace, 100%. But when you start to think like that, you start to abuse the grace of God, because you start to lose an appreciation for the bad news that preceded the good news. And if you understand how bad the news was before you heard the good news becomes that much better. So don't just discard it. Don't just read over it. It's like the moral law of God is it's our standard. In fact, it's God's standard that he gives to us. It's a standard of perfection. It's the line. It's the plumb line, as Amos saw in a vision. He saw a plumb line. It's like this vertical line with a weight at the bottom. It's like, it's straight. There's a plumb line, and it's called the law, and it's God's perfection written in words. It's his holiness given to us, which gives us this incredible appreciation for just how holy he is. It's like it's a divine diagnostic tool. That's what it is. I don't know who has been for a gastroscopy. If you say what, then you haven't been. If you've been, you know it, you know how to say it, you've really got a handle on this thing. It's where they go down your throat with a camera, to see what's going on there. Really fun. You must try it sometime. But it's invasive. It gets in. It's uncomfortable. But what it does is it shows what's happening. It shows what's wrong. Is it the solution to what's wrong? No. It just shows you what's wrong. It shows that you have an issue. You have a problem that requires attention. There's treatment needed. And so this divine diagnostic tool that God gives us is our vision of how perfect he is, how holy he is, his standard of perfection that we actually need to live by. But it's also the thing that he meters out divine judgment on. It's the gauge. It's the plumb line. It's like, how far short are we falling? Well, that's what you look at. It shows us that. It reveals the fact that we are in need of help. And the deviation from this perfect standard, from this plumb line, is called sin. As soon as we move slightly away, we've sinned. And anyone bold enough to say, I'm still on the line? No? Good. There's scripture that backs that up. Like if you believe I've veered off the line, then the Bible actually helps us to know that that's true. So Psalm 14 says, they have all gone astray. They are all alike corrupt. There is none that does good. No, not one. Quite clear. Psalm 143 says, no man living is righteous before you. You come before God. No one can say, I stayed on the line. The plumb line you gave me. It's like I've held it. No one can stand before God and say that. No one's righteous before you. Romans 3, Paul writes, all have sinned and fall short of this glory, your glory, that you've fallen short. There's no way that you can actually do this. And 1 John 1, John's this great pastor by heart, and he helps you to just think twice. If you think you're good, if you think you're actually not that bad, he says, if we claim we have no sin, we are only fooling ourselves and not living in the truth. And then in verse 10 he says, if we claim we have not sinned, we are calling God a liar, and showing that His word has no place in our hearts. It's quite a thing. It's like when you read those verses. But fortunately, no one put their hand up, so we're all in agreement. We have deviated from the line. We have a problem. Then he says, if someone carries consecrated meat, basically meat that has been set apart for sacrifice, but it's clean meat. It's clean. Carried in the fold of their garment, that fold touches bread or stew or a whole bunch of things. Does it become consecrated? He's asking the question, does it become consecrated? What would the priest have to say? And the priest answers, no. So basically what he's saying there, if there's something that's clean and it touches something that is unclean, does the thing that's unclean become clean? Are you with me? That's the question. The answer is no. So let me put that in illustration. You feel like some scrambled eggs. You take 2 eggs out of the fridge. You crack the one open, and it's fruit. So, yeah, I told you, this thing is going to get very uncomfortable. So what do? Do you carry on with the process? Or do you go find a new egg? So like if the other egg is clean, and you're saying, okay, well, let me put it into the mixture, because the clean egg's going to sort out the unclean egg. No. So what they're saying is, if you bring your clean egg, and it touches something that's unclean, does that which is clean make the thing that's unclean clean? No. And the priest is clear. As far as the law is concerned, that's not how it works. And then he says, if a person defiled by contact with a dead body touches one of these things, does it become defiled? And the priest replies, yes, it becomes defiled. So the reverse is true. Because if you put your first egg in and it's clean, but then you add an egg that's fruit, does the unclean egg make the clean egg unclean? Yes. So what does that mean? That which is unclean can be transferred. It spreads. It has a permeating reality. That which is clean, it doesn't happen in the reverse. It doesn't happen the other way. So if you are unclean, you can't do something clean to undo the fact that you're unclean. We were at the airport. And, sometimes you see something at the airport that's not quite familiar. Like you don't often see it at the airport, like a dog. And so we're there at the check-in counters, and this family comes. The daughter's got a border collie on the leash. It comes around, and it is like, so excited. So immediately, it's like, that's not your average passenger. Like, what are you doing in the airport? But it's this beautiful dog. It's got these like pale blue eyes, piercing pale blue eyes. And the family is behind her, and they're kind of pushing all their luggage. And there's a moment where I see these pale blue eyes get a little bigger. And then I saw like back legs had just been dropped as well. And guess what it was doing? Right? So right there on this beautifully clean floor of the airport, this dog does a little doo-doo. And then the wife, who's directly behind it, realizes what's going on. She feels the need to kind of push the trolley into its back, and its eyes got even bigger, but it's too late. And she kind of stepped over that thing, and the husband was the funniest, because he just did like this wide angle, kind of looking at the check-in counters as if nothing had happened, kept going. The next guy, and in an airport, no one looks down. It's not the place where you look down. You never look down in an airport. You always, this is how you travel. You don't look down. And yes, he stepped right in that thing. And I saw this guy in the background doing a little gagging. Then there are more people coming and everyone's trying to warn them, like, oh, no, 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 no. It's like warning. No, it doesn't help. Just step in that thing. And it was like making its way all over the floor. If you're offended by this in any way, this is just it's a helpful way for you to know, like, how does God feel when sin comes? It's a great offense. There's dirt and it permeates. Never thought an airport could be that fun. Internet's running to the guys that's like working there. You got to tell them they got to clean it up. And I'm just standing there and I'm just laughing. It's one of the funniest. I had a lot of fun at the airport, or at the airport, which is what I called it for the rest of the morning. But when something unclean comes into contact with something clean, unclean wins. So the first guy that stood in it, his shoes were clean. But by standing in it, that which was unclean didn't become clean. That which was clean became unclean. So that's like the way in which it flows. And uncleanliness or uncleanness, whatever the right phrase is, it transfers, it spreads, it permeates, it contaminates. But that which is clean doesn't. And we need to understand what God is actually saying through Haggai, because it paints the picture of just how serious our dilemma is. It's a big problem. Then Haggai said in verse 14, so it is with this people. Yikes. Because it was so much easier when we spoke about, clean meat and, contact with, like those things. That's easy. We can talk about a funny incident in an airport. But when God says, so it is with this people, it's... And just in case you want to be defensive, remember, John, if we claim we have no sin, we fool ourselves, we call God a liar. So it's not a time to be defensive. I've seen that in my own heart. I become very defensive. If something is pointed out or like wrong in me, I want to defend. I had a friend once who was called out on a whole bunch of things. Someone had the audacity to go like, you do this and you that and you that. You know what his response was? He said, I'm glad that's all you know about me. I took a hit that day. I was getting ready to defend him. I was thinking, buddy, you got to be careful what you're saying now. You're going to get it coming back at you. And instead of saying that, he said, I'm glad that's all you know about me. Because if you knew everything about me, we'd be busy for days. That's a healthy view of the unclean reality of our lives and that we are defiled. And then it says, whatever they do and whatever they offer there is defiled. So whatever you put your hands to becomes unclean. Whatever you have to offer becomes unclean. The works that you could do are defiled and therefore unacceptable. That which you bring as an offering is defiled because you're defiled. You're bringing it. You've touched it. Your work, your hands, your offering. All of it's defiled, so it's unacceptable. And all of this is happening while they're building the temple. It's amazing how you could be doing the work of the Lord, but actually in your heart there's like stuff happening. And you can put a whole bunch of things under the banner of ministry. But let me tell you something. God is calling us to purity. He's calling us to His holiness. We can get so wrapped up with all of what's happening in the season that we are in now, but we are in a relationship with the living God who is perfect in every way, and He's calling us to a life of purity, holiness, and it's serious. It's no small matter. He just keeps speaking to His people. And as He does, He puts it on paper and compiles it in this book that we have, that is His word, that is true for us and real for us. And when we open it up, we must allow it to read us as much as we are reading it. Are you encouraged this morning? Sin is not something that you can limit to an aspect of your life. You know, you can't say, listen, man, I know I've got a short temper, but as for the rest of me, all good. Besides, I'm 20% Italian. Like, you can hear people speak like that. You know, it's like, I'm mostly good. No, you're not 20% Italian. You are 100% corrupt. Because, you know, if there's anger in your heart, and there is no, way that you have an ability to keep that anger, it's not sanctified anger, it's not a righteous anger, it's a frustration, it's a lashing out. That's unclean. Anger towards your brother means you've deviated. And if there's an aspect in your life that's deviated from that line, it's unclean, and it makes all of you unclean. It spreads, it contaminates all of who you are. And that's why God says, so it is with the people. They are defiled. So I did that one thing wrong. No, you're defiled. There's nothing that we can do, and there's nothing we can bring that'll fix this. So righteous deeds, it says in God's word, right? Your righteous deeds are like filthy rags in my sight. Like, that's our efforts to bring cleanness into our lives. And offerings, peace offerings, like maybe I can find something of the favor of God because I'll bring what I've got to bring. I'll serve, I'll do this, but it's in my head and in my heart. I'm hoping it's going to tip the scales of the wrong in my life. You know what that's like? It's like bringing air freshener to our dog situation. It's like, I got the solution. I'm just going to spray this here over the mess. Sorted. No, not sorted. I've always been quite confused by air fresheners. I feel like I need to bring a little bit of lightness at the moment because pine mist. What is that going to do other than make it smell like you pooed in a pine tree? Strawberries and cream. Feels like I'm at Wimbledon. No, it's not. Sea breeze. It's like there's a breeze, but I'm not getting sea. Do they not know that when they add the fragrance to what's already there, the outcome is not what's on the label? Can someone just come up with a very neutral, no smell, just sort out that thing? Why we must bring lavender, I don't know what all into the mix because it doesn't actually help. But our works and our offerings is like spraying air freshener over our defiled lives. It doesn't fix the uncleanness. It just puts an awkward smell in the room. Okay, so we have a serious dilemma. And hence what follows. So now we're moving into the good news. Now give careful thought to this. From this day on, consider how things were before one stone was laid on another. In the Lord's temple, when anyone came to a heap of 20 measures, there were only 10. When anyone went to a wine vat to draw 50 measures, there were only 20. I struck all the work on your hands, with blight, mildew, and hail. Yet you did not return to me, declares the Lord. From this day on, from this 24th day of the 9th month, give careful thought to the day when the foundation of the Lord's temple was laid. When we talk about stones being laid on top of a foundation, and we talk about the foundation of the temple, we must realize there is some very profound gospel imagery that is being shown to us. Because the foundation of the temple has been laid, and his name is Jesus. And the church is being built, one living stone added atop of another. It says, consider how things were before one stone was laid. So there's a foundation. There's a day where the foundation was laid. And then there's another day where stones were put on top of this foundation. And so God is saying, consider how things were before the stones were laid. In gospel imagery, what he's saying is, consider how your life was before you became a living stone, living upon the cornerstone, living upon the foundation of Christ. Consider your life before that, and you will realize that there was serious lack in your life. You were lacking. There wasn't a righteous harvest in your life. Even if you had material things and you had all the money in the world, there was still a lack within you, which is obvious when we look at people who's chasing money because they're just never satisfied. So you had lack and you had lack and you had lack. Spiritual lack, emotional lack, some cases material lack. But consider your life prior to the day that you were laid on this foundation. And then he says, once you've considered that, the next thing that I want you to do is give careful attention to the day when the temple was laid. That's what happens when we take communion, because we're giving careful attention to the day that the temple foundation was laid. That's gospel depiction over and over again, which is why Jesus says, do this often. Because we've got to give careful attention to it, because that's our solution. That's where we live our lives from. It's because of that we get to become living stones that are placed on top of this foundation. Without that, we have trouble. Give careful thought. Is there yet any seed left in the barn? I thought that's an interesting phrase for the season that we are in with our barn. Until now, the vine and the fig tree, the pomegranate and the olive tree have not borne fruit. See, God's speaking to his people when they're in a very vulnerable space. Because the question is there any seed left in the barn? The answer is no. So it's a question that the answer is everyone's clear. They know there's no seed left. Why? Because the seed's in the ground. So they have sown their seed. They haven't consumed their seed, because they realize if we consume the seed and we just consume the seed, well, then we're not going to have seed to plant in order for fruit to come, so that from the fruit there'll be more seed. That's how God's economy works. You sow the seed, you don't consume it. But all of what was in the barn was sown and put into the ground. But yet there's still no fruit. There's no harvest. So they got no guarantee of what's to come. I mean, it's a position of vulnerability. And that's why when it comes to giving and giving by faith, it's you're not giving because of how much seed is in the barn. You're giving because you know that when you sow, God has an ability to turn that into way more than you could ever. And not so that it comes back to you, but the reality of his blessing over what we sow. So this is like a faith shift in their hearts, because they're realizing we need to trust God in this moment. There's no physical sign of a harvest. There's no guarantee of a blessing. But then God says this, from this day on, I will bless you. So you considered the day that the temple was laid. You considered the day that stones started to be laid on that foundation. And from this day, he's not talking about material stuff. Let's not go there in our Western way of thinking. There is a blessing that flows, a salvation blessing, a righteous harvest. He says, from this day, I will bless you. What is this promise based on? The word of the Lord came to Haggai a second time on the 24th day of the month. Tell Zerubbabel, governor of Judah, that I'm going to shake the heavens and the earth. I will overturn royal thrones and shatter the power of the foreign kingdoms. I will overthrow chariots and their drivers. Horses and their riders will fall, each by the sword of his brother. Horses and their riders will fall. I had an image of a bare-chested president on a horse. Some of you are realizing what I'm talking about. Outside of the gospel, there will be a day that he will fall. You see, God's ability to shake the heavens, to shake the earth, to overthrow, to overturn, to shatter, comes in and through this gospel message of the temple foundation being laid. Is it all at play now? It's an unfolding reality. But we know there's a day. There is a day coming where all of this, Hebrews actually unpacks the scripture even more. It says things will be shaken in such a way that everything that can be shaken will be shaken to a point where it will be done away with. And only that which is unshakable will remain. So the question is, are you going to be a living stone on this foundation that is unshakable? Or are you going to hedge your bets on your own efforts and your own abilities and your own agenda and live your life by what you think is good for you? No, we come to the foundation stone. So he's speaking to Zerubbabel now. He has been speaking to Zerubbabel, Joshua, and the people. For the first time, he's just speaking to Zerubbabel. But he's not speaking to the people. He's actually speaking for the people now. He's saying to Zerubbabel, I have something that I need to say to you, which has an impact on everyone else. So he's honing in. Then he tells Zerubbabel what he's going to do. He's going to shake, he's going to overturn, he's going to shatter, he's going to overthrow. Things are about to get real. And then he says how he's going to do it. And, when we think of powers being brought down and thrones being overturned, we think force, right? Like we got to get it. We come against those things by taking it on. And if we don't have to do it and God's going to do it, well, he's going to take them on. I mean, he can use force. He can just suck the air out of whoever and they'll just fall down and die. But he has a very particular way of doing it. And this is what it says. I will take you, my servant, Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, and I will make you like my signet ring, for I have chosen you. So how is he going to do the shaking? How is he going to do the overturning? Well, he's not going to do it through a mighty king. He's going to do it through a humble servant. Zerubbabel, you are going to be the seal. You see, a signet ring is what a king would use. A person of authority, ultimate authority, would have a signet ring, and they would mark things with that signet ring. It would be a seal of their authority and their approval of things, like a stamp on the back of a letter. So he's saying, Zerubbabel, you will be my signet ring. You'll be the seal. You'll be the one that I will work through. And we're like, Zerubbabel? Really? Say rugby ball? Of all people? Who is this unknown man that has come out from the shadows? He's only a governor. He's not even a king. I mean, he's come from the royal line, but there's already a king in play. The king is the Persian king. So that's why his title is just governor. He's nowhere near what we had in the previous kings of Israel, like King David. Whoa, hold on a second. No, it's just Zerubbabel. It's just a governor. He's just a humble servant. He's not sitting on his throne, giving orders for other people to do stuff. He himself is building the temple with the people. He's just like your average Joe in the mix. And he was born in Babylon, of all places, because they were in exile. That's his name, Zerubbabel's seed and Babylon. He's the seed of Babylon. That's where he came from. Of all places, born in Babylon. Like, who is this guy? And why? Why would God say, I've chosen you to be my signet ring, my seal of authority, my seal of approval? The answer to that question lies in a broader, big picture understanding of God's unfolding redemption story. And it goes all the way back to the messianic promise in Genesis 3, where God says to Eve, I'm promising a seed will come from you. And he says to the enemy, you will strike his heel, you will bruise his heel, but he will crush your head. See, a promise of a seed then, and all through the story of the Bible, that seed is preserved. Even through exile. And so if you look at the genealogies of Jesus, right, there's one in Matthew and there's one in Luke. And the one in Matthew goes in chronological order. So it kind of goes from Abraham all the way through to Jesus. And there's some players in the mix and like turning points in the Abraham, David, Jesus, but in between a whole bunch of names. So that seed is being preserved all the way through. And then on the account in Luke, it's also Jesus' genealogy, but it traces it back. So it starts with Jesus and then goes all the way back to Abraham. And in fact, it goes as far as Adam, to the point where that messianic promise was given. But if you lay the two genealogies next to one another, you'll actually see they're the same. Until you read a little bit more carefully. Because from Abraham to David, it's the same. But then from David to Jesus, different names. So Abraham to David, same names, and then from David to Jesus in Matthew's account, a whole different set of names. And on Luke's account, different names. Well, hold on a second, what's going on here? Well, the one is the paternal line, and the other one is the maternal line. So from Jesus, it's Joseph this way and Mary that way. But not only is it paternal and maternal, it's royal and biological. So Jesus is being shown as the king who would come from a royal line, but he's also a man, and he would come through the biology of human beings. And all the names from David to Jesus in these two genealogies are different, bar one, Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel. He's the one who appears in both genealogies on the bottom scale between David and Jesus. Why is that? Well, God is representing Jesus here in two different ways. Because on the one hand, Jesus is a majestic king who is glorious as he wears his crown and sits on his throne. He is the lion. But he's also a humble servant that comes in the form of a man and submits himself to suffering and willingly dies as the greatest act of service this world has ever seen. He comes as a humble servant, born in Nazareth of all places, born into poverty. You see, Zerubbabel was from a royal line, but there was nothing kingly about him. Jesus was from a royal line. But his greatest confusion when he started to speak about the kingdom, not his confusion, but the confusion that stirred in the hearts and minds of people around him was like, kingdom? Are you the king? You don't look like a king. But yet, Zerubbabel serves as this incredible picture of a humble servant. And that seed would just be preserved all the way through because God was intent on saving humanity. And what is he doing? He's building the temple. I mean, Jesus said, destroy this temple, I will raise it again in 3 days. Zechariah 4 says the following, Zerubbabel is the one who laid the foundation of this temple, and he will complete it. Then you will know that the Lord of heaven's armies has sent me. Do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin, to see the plumb line in Zerubbabel's hand. So Jesus is the seed of Abraham. He is the promised blessing of salvation. But he's also the seed of David. He is the majestic and conquering king. But he is also the seed of Zerubbabel, a humble servant, who would lay hold of this plumb line, the thing that was put on us, the thing that shows us up as being unclean and defiled, our deviation. He would take that plumb line in his hand So I'll submit myself to this, and he would live the perfect life because he's the only one that didn't deviate from that perfect straight line. And you know what he was doing in that? He was developing a perfect record. A perfect record of a life. Have you ever wondered why Jesus didn't die much younger? Why he wasn't born and as a child could die? He needed to live a full life of perfection so that accredited righteousness, a record of perfection, could come our way. Because we are defiled, we have deviated. But in the beauty of the gospel, what he does is he brings about a righteousness that's his record, that when we put our faith in him, it gets credited to us. When we stand before God, we are not going to be pleading our own cleanness. We're going to be saying, I'm here because of the cleanness of Christ. His record is mine. And then, of course, he died the death that is actually ours to bear. Because that deviation, that uncleanness, that permeating reality in our lives that we can't fix, we can't tip, we can't change with anything that we can do or anything that we could bring, is the very thing that his death sorts out once and for all. The penalty for that sin he bears, it was actually ours to bear. He takes the full judgment, the full wrath of God towards sin and rebellion. He carries that sin. Like it becomes his, which means what? He's removed it from us. That's how you deal with something that's unclean. You don't spray something over it. You don't do a few good things trying to tip the scales. It needs to be removed. And it was removed from us. Those who put their faith in Jesus, who come to him in repentance and faith, it's removed from us. It was put on his shoulders. He bears the judgment for it. And he takes our sin and our uncleanness and extends a clean life of righteousness. And so we get forgiveness and righteousness in this foundation of the temple that was laid. And in so doing, become living stones that get added to this house that God is building. What a joy.